Hey everyone. Okay, so today I'm gonna kind of get on my soapbox. The question is, should you become an S corporation? I'm going to talk about 3 things you need to know before you make that decision and what you need to weigh the pros and cons about. Okay, so before I get into that, be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and hit that bell so that you're notified of new videos that I release to stay in the know. Okay, so I had a client email me earlier in the week and said, hey, I want to become an S Corp. Right now, he just files, he's an LLC, but it's just him. He has no employees. His business, he's the only person that does the business. It's a single owner LLC, so he files a Schedule C on his tax return right now. And he pays self-employment tax, of course, on those, the net income, the bottom line. So he says he's been talking to a friend, talking about how great the S Corp is. He can save all this money on self-employment tax. So, he emails me and says, I want to become an S Corp. What do I need to do? I say, okay, this is how we need to do it. We need to file an S election, Form 2553 with the IRS. And, sure, I can do that for you. So he pays me to do that. And in that email, I also told him these 3 things. You realize, this is your responsibilities now when you become an S corporation. It's a little bit different than the way you've been doing things. And so he's like, yeah, I still want to do it. Okay, great. So I spend the time to fill out the Form 2553, get everything ready. He signs it. I've got it ready to be mailed, certified letter. We still actually have it here. I haven't mailed it yet, which is a good thing. When I tell him, okay, you need to set yourself up a salary, a reasonable salary. You're going to have payroll now. Here's a link to Gusto, who I use. Well, once he got into trying to do all that and looking at the cost benefits, which I tried to point out before, he decided that, oh, well, I don't want to go through all this trouble. It's just me. I don't have any other employees. I still want to be an S Corp, but I don't want to do this. Well, all right, so let's back up here. I tried to explain through email what is required as an S corporation, but I thought this would be a great video to explain 3 things you need to know before you make that final decision to turn your LLC or sole proprietorship or corporation in elect S Corp status. First of all, your net income. What's your bottom line net income right now? So every CPA has their different thresholds, but really generally, mine that I use is $40,000. If you've got your total top revenue sales, all your expenses deducted from that, if your bottom line that you're going to pay taxes on is $40,000 or more, that's when I usually, during tax planning, say, hey, we need to look at S corporation to save on the taxes that you're paying at the end of each year. So first of all, is your net income high enough to outweigh the additional costs that you're going to incur by being an S corporation? And so those are the other 2 things I want to talk about, are the additional costs that it takes to run your S Corp. So the second thing is reasonable compensation is what the IRS calls it. If it's just you even, and you're the officer of your corporate, your business, you're going to have to pay yourself reasonable compensation. And that's very subjective. But the best thing to do is to, without doing a compensation study where you gather data, and there's companies that do that for you for a fee. If something happened to you and someone needed to come in and do what you do in your business, how much would you have to pay them? That's reasonable compensation. If you think you can hire for somebody off the street for $25,000 a year salary and they could run your business and do everything you do, fine. Have that be your reasonable compensation. If you would have to pay someone $100,000 to do what you do, then that's the reasonable compensation. So you've got to come up with that number, and then you've got to go sign up with the Payroll Service. I use Gusto, and I'll link to them below. But you have to sign up with the Payroll Service and pay yourself a wage, monthly, bi-weekly, weekly, whatever you choose. But then payroll taxes will be taken out, and your company will have to match those payroll taxes. And then every quarter, you have to file quarterly Form 941 with the IRS to pay those payroll taxes to the IRS. Okay, so that's a quarterly return and payroll tax deposits that you now have to keep up with. And every state is different too. So you have your state unemployment taxes usually that you have to pay quarterly. So yes, there's more money involved. Your business is now matching that Social Security and Medicare tax that's withheld from your pay. And so that's the self-employment tax, but it's only on the reasonable salary portion that you come up with. It's not on your whole bottom line like it is right now if you're not an S-Corp. So there are tax savings in that, but your net income has to be high enough to compensate for that. And so number 3, the third thing you have to realize is you have more reporting obligations. You're going to have an extra tax return to file now by March 15th every year if you're a calendar year S-Corp. It's called Form 1120S. You've got to file that by March 15th every year. And so that's more tax preparation fees you're going to have to pay your CPA to prepare that. And you know, those fees range, but I doubt you're going to be able to get one for less than $500 a year done. That's on the low end, and that's with no bookkeeping involved. So you've got the 1120S. You also, if you have, depending on what state you live in, you may have another state tax return there. I'm only talking about federal obligations here. Like I mentioned before, you're going to have your payroll quarterly 941 tax return that you'll have to file each quarter to report those payroll taxes. And your state's going to have probably an unemployment quarterly return you have to pay. And then at year end, you're going to have to process a W-2 for yourself. And if you hired any other employees, of course, you'd have to do that. But we're assuming that it's just a one-man show here. And so you'd have to give yourself a W-2. And your payroll company a lot of times handles that, whoever you're using for payroll. And you're also going to have to pay federal unemployment tax and file a Form 940. At year end in January. So that's just, you know, skimming the surface on 3 things that you need to consider before you say, hey, I want to be an S-Corp because my friend Joe over here said he's an S-Corp and he hardly pays any tax or his tax is a lot less than mine. You know, those conversations are great, but please, please, please do your own homework, do your own research, and ask your CPA the pros and cons before you just blanketly email your CPA and say, hey, I want to become an S-Corp, and you run into some roadblocks there after you've already gotten into the process and realize, I don't know if I want to do all this. But like I said, a lot of the times if your net income's high enough, it is worth it. But just be aware, be knowledgeable, do your homework, and know what all is involved. So I hope this helped you out. Leave a comment below if you have any other video topics you want me to cover in future videos. And be sure and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you were helped by this information. And also check out the resources that I have in the description below.